Chapter 1. Limitless Potential System. The last train moving from Middlesbrough had gone 20 minutes ago. William knew this because he couldn't stop himself from repeatedly checking his phone, not because he wanted to be on the train, rather fiddling with his phone gave himself something to focus on, and if he had something to focus on then he wouldn't be able to think about the diabolical stinker of a day that he was having, the cherry on top of it being the voicemail that he just received 50-odd minutes ago. He was sat on the circle of Rowcliffe Park's second pitch. It was just like the main pitch, except that it didn't have the floodlights that were on the main pitch which would make him visible, and at the moment, William did not want to be visible. The second pitch was at the back of the training complex, and was separated from it through a large car park. The sky above was a shade of black or grey or purple. William wasn't sure, that he didn't know the name of. Something between the three, covered by the cloud, was stained by the edges of the light pollution of the Middlesbrough proper, and of course contributing most to it was the training complex he was in, as well as several retail parks and the townspeople going about their business, albeit most of them were in cars as it was currently raining cats and dogs. William had been sitting in the center circle for 40 whole minutes. His body was getting massively cold, and he was almost beginning to start shivering. He couldn't feel his fingers inside his gloves. They were numb, and he could see his breath come out in visible puffs. He did not move still, even though he was assaulted by cold from all directions. Moving would mean him going somewhere, and he did not know where he wanted to go yet. The voicemail he received was from David Stanton, the head coach of the Middlesbrough under-18s. William's head coach. William had been in the shower after the session that he was told not to attend, but fuck it, right? Wrong. Don't come in on Tuesday or Wednesday, William. We're conducting a new squad review and it would be much more easier for everyone included if you weren't around. I'll be in touch at the end of the week with more information. Hey. William let out a choked laugh. 23 fucking seconds. That was how long the voicemail was. William had listened to it multiple times, so much so that he was pretty sure that he could recite the entire thing off head, and somehow it still didn't register inside of him. Denial, is it? William spoke again. Is this what denial feels like? Fucking squad review. William muttered again, this time, smashing the base of his fist into the wet grass. He had been in the U18s for 4 years. He had watched 3 full cohorts above him go on to professional contracts or get released, but somehow he was still there. He thought it was a positive sign, the fact that they kept him for as they did, because the alternative meaning would be that he was so much of a bum that he couldn't even make a debut for the first team 4 years after playing with the youth team. The squad review meant that they were releasing players, and the fact that they told him not to come meant that he was most likely going to be among the released players. He was 17 years old at the moment, and now he was going to be released from the only football club he ever wanted to play for. Ha 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 ha. William let out a hoarse laughter while looking at the sky. It was a habit he'd developed in his early teens. Looking up at the sky, not laughing like a lunatic. His dad told him something that made him adopt the habit. He couldn't remember for the life of him what his dad said, but he still liked looking up. It was liberating. Unfortunately, on this particular night, there was nothing liberating about the sky. It was a gloomy mess, much like himself. Is this it? William whispered to himself, as he lowered his head. Rain droplets were beginning to get into the air. The silence that followed after was very loud. Wind in the car trees. A car on the A66, and his horse breathing. And then it became louder. A holographic panel appeared in the air, approximately 60 centimeters in front of his face. It was in the air, not on his phone or on his screen, just there and lifelike. Hovering in the dark air above the grass, with a luminescent blue color. What the fuck? William stared blankly at the projection for a few seconds. And then he moved to touch it, but his hands phased through it. Ding! Limitless Potential System has awakened. Host identified, William Smithson. Age, 17. Club affiliation, Middlesbrough FC Academy U18. Position, attacking midfielder, second striker, central midfielder, right midfielder. Status: Academy Scholar. Current rating: 54. Potential cap: 72. Credits: 0. Core stats: pace: 58. Shooting: 51. Passing: 55. Dribbling: 53. Defending: 47. Physicality: 48. Endurance: 60. Mental: 61. Set pieces: 44. Leadership: 39. Welcome host. Shall we begin? William did not move for a very long time. He was still trying to make sense of what was currently happening. The panel remained in the air in front of him. The numbers didn't disappear, and his eyes was fixated on the last notification from the holographic panel in front of him. Shall we begin? Unlike the rest of the notification, it was blinking, once per second. Gradually, he realized that he was cold as hell. From a slight discomfort, to something that required immediate attention, so he stood up. He felt his knees protest the motion as he stood up from the frozen ground and stood there in the dark with the holographic panel glowing at eye height. 54. His overall rating was 54. He had never seen his own stats rendered as numbers before, and there was something quite unpleasant about it. He knew he was a bum, but watching the holographic panel tell him that slapped a bit. It was like when you write an exam and you know you're going to fail. You still hold a little bit of hope towards passing until you actually see the result of the exam. He thought about the voicemail, and the voice of his coach, how cold it was. He thought about the 4 years that he spent in the Middlesbrough Academy. The early mornings, the extra sessions. How he had turned to a social recluse just because he was training for the football and to achieve his dreams. A lot of his life flashed in front of him at that moment. And he sighed. He reached his hand out and touched the space where his potential cap was displayed. William Smithson stood on the frozen number 2 pitch at Rockcliffe Park at 9:15 on a Tuesday evening in July and read. He read for a long time. When he finally walked to the car park, the frost had thickened on the grass behind him and his footprints showed clearly in it, 2 parallel lines of impressions leading from the center circle to the gate, the footprints of someone who had arrived one thing and left, perhaps, something else. Chapter 2. It's actually a limitless potential system. The terraced house on Keswick Road in Acklam had 3 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a kitchen which was too small for the family of 4, but somehow it contained each and every one of them at once. There was also a garden at the back that Gary, William's dad, had resurfaced in artificial grass a long time ago so that William could practice without spoiling the grass. Although there were several bald patches testifying to the fact that William hadn't wasted his father's efforts. Gary had invested a lot into William's football career. To call William his Project Mbappe wouldn't be too much of a stretch. In fact, it wasn't a stretch at all. William got him 20 minutes to 10. He noticed that the kitchen light was still on, telling him that his mother was still up. His mother usually went to bed a lot earlier, so the kitchen light being on told him that she was waiting. Sandra Smithson was sitting idly in the kitchen with a cup of tea in one hand, while staring at the television which was on in the living room, with the sound reduced. TH News was on, and they were currently on a weather review. She turned her head towards the door when she heard it open, and stared wordlessly at William when he walked inside, drenched and dripping. "I got a voicemail from the gaffer," William said as he took off his coat and hung it at the back of the door. "Don't come in Tuesday or Wednesday. Said a squad review is supposed to be happening." Sandra considered it for a moment. Her face was very expressive. She was the type of person who you could tell what they were thinking just based off of their facial expressions. Shay was 44 and had been working multiple jobs along with William's father to make ends meet. "Then show them," Sandra said, wincing as she saw William's muddy feet step on the floor that she mopped just an hour earlier. "Show them what?" William scoffed. "They've already made up their minds. I'm gone." "Did the coach say that in the voicemail?" Sandra asked. "He didn't have to say shit," William said. "We all know how it goes from here." "No, you can't say that. It's not decided yet, Sandra said, as she stood up, picking up her mug. Are you eating? There's some pasta in the pot. And clean up the damn floor when you're done. William ate the pasta while standing. He didn't want to sit down and have more to clean. His dad was in the front room. He could faintly hear the sound of the television there. He was watching a football match. His dad usually worked 6 until 2 at the steelworks on weekdays and was usually in bed by 10, but the light under the front room door suggested he had stayed up, either because he had heard the gate to or because the match was interesting. Probably both. William finished eating the pasta, and then went up to his room. His room was quite small. It had a desk pushed against the window, just so it could fit. And the chair in front of the desk had turned into a second house of sorts for his clothes. He used to have football posters pasted all around the walls, but he took them down when he was 14, but one could still see the scars that the glue from the posters left on the wall. On the far side of the wall, there was a shelf which housed a trophy from a new 13 District League, a worn-out pair of football boots, which was there 'cause he was feeling sentimental, and a picture of his sister, Jess at age 9, holding a fish she had caught during the family trip. He sat on his bed and willed the panel to show up, and it did almost immediately. I'm beginning to get the hang of this thing. William smiled faintly as he saw the panel. He navigated to the part which had the information about the system, something he saw briefly on the field, and read all of it. The system was not, as it very explicitly mentioned in the introduction, a cheat. But it pretty much was. It served as a measurement unit and a guide. It could track everything he did with a precision that most coaching staff or scouts do, and it could give a number to his attributes, or things like his match ratings. It could assign TSKs calibrated to his current ability and desired development, and then he got rewarded through the use of something called credits. Credits were the system's currency. They could be spent in the system's shop on stat improvements, skill unlocks, training programs, and most importantly, the improvement of his potential cap. William stopped at the part about the potential cap and read it again 3 times. What the fuck is this? This is a fucking cheat. Limitless potential sys. Makes sense, William thought to himself as he read through the description. According to the system, every player had a potential cap. It was a ceiling on the maximum value any individual stat could reach. His was currently 72. No stat could exceed 72 through natural development unless the cap was raised. In other words, he was doomed to have the career of a baller shuffling around second-tier clubs until he retired. It wasn't particularly bad, but it still wasn't the type of career he had dreamed of. Fortunately for him, the cap could be raised by spending credits in the system shop, and even though raising his potential cap was astronomically expensive, but there was nothing a little bit of saving couldn't accomplish. 72. But it could be increased. He immediately navigated to the system's shop, and found the section which had the cap expansion. Potential cap expansion. Current potential cap, 72. Expansion 1 plus 3 to potential cap. Price, 500 credits. Expansion 2, locked. Expansion 3, locked. Opening square bracket ... closing square bracket. Note: expanding cap does not directly contribute to increment of stats. Stats can only grow through training, match performance, and skill acquisition. The cap determines the player ceiling, but the player is directly responsible for his current level. William swallowed some saliva as he read the information. He was currently like a hungry dog who had a buttload of meat chunked in front of him. He immediately checked his credits balance, and upon seeing the big fat 0 that was there, he was brought back to earth. He needed 500 credits before the first expansion was possible. He navigated to the credits section and read the earning structure. By the time he was done reading it, he had a smile on his face. So much for potential expansion being expensive. Stupid, lying system. I'm not a cheat, you're a fucking cheat among cheats. Match rating 7.0 and above, 50 credits. Match rating 8.0 and above, 100 credits. Man of the match, 200 credits. Goal, 30 credits. Assist, 25 credits. Daily quest completion, 20 to 80 credits, depending on the difficulty of the quest. Weekly quest completion, 100 to 300 credits. Hidden quest completion, variable. Training session rated excellent, 15 credits. William immediately did the math in his head. If he played consistently and completed the quest, he could amass 500 credits in roughly 6 to 8 weeks of consistency. It wasn't that long considering his normal stats were still way below his cap, and he still had room for improvements. But he had to work very hard. The contract review was in 3 weeks, so he had to give the performances of his lifetime so that he would change their minds. He was still thinking when the system's first daily quest arrived as a flash notification. Daily quest. Complete 200 passes against the rebounder wall at Rockcliffe Park. Accuracy threshold, 85%. Time limit, complete before the general training session begins. Reward, 20 credits. William immediately checked the time and almost entered a flurry of curses. He had spent so much time studying the system, and he didn't even notice how much time had gone by. It was already past 2 in the morning. He immediately set his alarm for 5 in the morning, then he lay back on his bed, and closed his eyes. A lot of thoughts played around in his mind before he finally fell asleep. In the next room, his sister's alarm was going off at 3. She was one of those people that set alarms that would wake everyone else but her. Fortunately for William, he was so spent that her alarm didn't disturb his sleep. Chapter 3, definitely not a cheat. The rebounder wall was at the far end of the main training pitch. It was a very huge rebound frame, mounted atop a concrete floor. It could have its angle adjusted and there was a net at the base to stop the ball from rolling too far. The first team usually made use of it for shooting drills, but the academy used it mostly on Fridays. But on Tuesday morning, at 5:45 in the morning, it was first come first served. William had permission to use the training ground outside of scheduled sessions. It was written into the Academy Scholar Agreement, something that most scholars didn't test the validity of. William had been testing it since he was 15. He changed into his training outfit quickly, and jogged onto the main pitch. The floodlights were off, so he had a head torch strapped to his forehead, as it was still too dark to rely on natural light, causing there to be a beam of thin white light cut across the pitch as he jogged across the pitch to where the rebounder wall was situated. He opened the system panel and confirmed the quest parameters. 200 passes, 85% accuracy threshold, completed before the 7:30 session. The system would track completion automatically. Apparently, it had access to his data even though he did not consciously give it. He did not question this though. Quite frankly, he didn't really care too much about it. He had spent the early hours of the morning lying awake deciding to take the thing at face value, at least for now. Either it was real, in which case he should treat it as real, or it was some elaborate and specific hallucination produced by cold and stress and 3 years of being told he was not quite good enough, in which case doing 200 passes before breakfast would still improve his passing, so there was no actual downside to it. He set the rebounder at a comfortable angle and stood roughly 12 meters back. He took the first ball from the mesh pad and struck it. 43 passes in, the system flashed a small amber notification warning him that his pass accuracy was currently below the threshold. He had been rushing it, causing the passes to arrive back too fast. He had to calm down, so he took deep breaths, and then adjusted his stance, taking an extra touch on the next 10 or so passes to recalibrate. He completed the 200 passes when it was 13 minutes to 7. He stood for a moment with his hands on his knees, panting lightly, and he watched the holographic panel reappear. Daily quest complete. Pass completion, 191 200ths, 95.5%. Threshold met, yes, no. Reward, 20 credits. Credit balance, 20 fucking credits. William stared at his credit balance. He needed 500 for his first cap expansion. 20 was 4% of that, so that was progress. He went inside, showered and ate a small breakfast he brought with him from home and went back to the pitch at 7:15, making him the first person to arrive. The Tuesday training session was supposed to be a light technical day. Those type of sessions were ran when matches were on the weekend and the target was improving sharpness without fatigue. William had been told not to come in, but he had. He was disobeying the coach, but he didn't really care about that at the moment. They already planned on discarding him, so what difference did it make? When Stanton, the head coach, arrived, and saw him warming up on the pitch, he just spared him an extra glance before walking to set things up with his assistants. David Stanton was a 41, ex-lower league midfielder. He had been the coach at Middlesbrough's academy for 6 years, and even though the crude voicemail he sent William said otherwise, he was very nice. There was just too many players in the academy and few first-team slots, so he was required to be an asshole in quite a few football career stories. William warmed up alone. The other players arrived in groups of 2s and 3s, the usual pre-season noise and banter filling the cold morning air. Marcus Webb arrived last, as he always did. Somehow, he managed to always arrive just on time, a talent that William admired. He was wearing a new pair of boots, something that William noticed because they were the same model as his worn-out pair, but these were the ones that his own was supposed to be replaced by. The session ran for 40 minutes before the head coach, after staring to his right 10 times in a row and seeing William awkwardly training alone, sighed and pointed at him. Smithson, inside, on the right side of the 5. A small part of the pitch had been segregated to create a makeshift 5A-side pitch. It was 18 meters by 12, small enough to make sure that you didn't have time or space to think. William had always been average in those drills. He wasn't bad, but he was nothing special. When he got to the pitch, he saw a small flash of light and he saw the system panel at the corner of his vision, before it spread across him creating a translucent overlay. There were small green arrows that indicated passing lanes that were open or half spaces that could open up. The position of the other players were then rendered as faint overlays at the edge of his vision. There was a number in the top right of each player, that he understood to be their current pressing distance to the ball. William would have spent a minute wide-eyed if he had the time. Not a cheat, my ass, William thought to himself as he jogged to his position. He made his first touch of the game in the right channel. It was a hard pass that he barely got under control with his first touch. Usually, his first thought would have been to release it back to the nearest match and keep it simple. However, thanks to the system's overlay that now replaced his vision, he saw a gap on the far left. There was space for one of his teammates to run into. William didn't waste any time and played the ball across the full width of the pitch in one touch. The ball arrived somewhat at its intended destination. It was a bit overhit, but his teammate managed to chase down and get to the ball before the opposition, looking surprised that William had delivered such a pass. On the sidelines, David Stanton's head turned a bit, before nodding slightly. In the next 10 minutes, he played 3 more passes that had the same quality. Though they weren't as precise as he would have liked them, it was the vision that mattered. The system wasn't playing for him. William understood that fact. It was simply showing him things that he could not see on his own. It was still left to him to make the pass or make the run or whatever. The system was simply feeding him information, but he was still the one that had to take action and make use of the information. In other words, it could show him a passing lane or something, and William could make the pass, but the pass could end up being intercepted or inaccurate. David called the session to a close a few minutes after the match was over and then addressed the team. As the players jogged back, he held William back. "Come and see me on Thursday," David said. William nodded, and stifled the smile that was threatening to burst on his face. He walked back to the changing room, and as he took off his clothes, he finally smiled. "I can do this." Chapter 4, Nutmeg. "So what do you think he's going to tell you?" In the backyard of William's modest house, he was currently doing a small training drill. He moved the ball around a closed-up cluster of cones and then dribbled around the cones neatly, trying his best not to allow the ball to touch the cones. When he was done, he shot the ball into a goalpost that consisted of wooden poles holding a net upright. The bottom of the net was held firmly to the ground by 2 tires with heavy stones inside of them. "I have no fucking clue," Will said as he dropped to the ground. "But it has to be good, right? I guess." At the far side of the pitch, there was a brown-haired kid who looked the same age as Will, sitting on the floor. He had a protective cast on his leg. He was the one who was currently talking with Will. "I mean, they already decided to release me. Surely one training session can't change their minds." Alex, the brown-haired boy, shrugged. "I don't know. We won't know unless we find out. How's your injury, by the way?" Will asked as he fetched the ball from inside the net and went back to the starting point of the cones and just repeated the training drill. "It's getting better. The doctor said that I should be able to take off the cast by tomorrow and by next week I should be back on grass," Alex replied. His phone lit up after that, and after checking his notification, he stood up. "That's my mom. I should be on my way home right now." Will immediately stopped running with the ball and walked Alex to the entrance of his house. The pair then parted soon after, and Will decided to cut his training short. No matter how much he wanted to practice, he still had training the next day and he didn't want to overexert himself. The next day, Will woke up very early in the morning. He freshened up and went to Rockcliffe Park. The system had dropped another daily mission for him, and this time, it involved his shooting. He had to make 10 top corner shots in 20 attempts. It wasn't easy, but he managed to complete it on his 18th shot and got rewarded with 20 credits, taking him one step further in his goal of 500 credits so that he could improve his potential cap. After he was done completing the daily quest, he went and changed into the official training wear and waited for everyone to arrive. One by one, the players began coming into the locker room until it was officially time for training to begin and everyone marched out onto the field. "All right boys, today we're not really going to do anything physically intensive. We'll run a bit, pass a bit, and if you behave, we'll have a full training match," David addressed everyone as they gathered in front of him. "And remember, this is pre-season. We'll be having just 2 friendlies. This weekend we'll be playing against a team of trialists who would be looking to secure a place in the team. Remember to give it your best. The place that they're taking could easily be yours, so do your best." David talked about a few more topics before eventually ending his long pep talk and sending them to start the training exercises. They started with some yoga and exercises before doing more serious drills. At the end of the training session, there was a rondo session. "All right everyone, we're going to divide ourselves into 3 teams of 7. There will be 10 minutes on the clock, and inside of those 10 minutes, the people who manage to keep the ball for the most amount of time without it getting intercepted by the players in the circle will leave training early. In the same vein, anyone inside the circle who makes the most interceptions will get to leave early. Let's start boys." David clapped his hands and sharply divided everyone into groups of 7. Then they randomly decided the 2 players who were going to stay inside the circle, and thankfully for Will, he was one of the players making the circle. When everything was sorted out, David blew his whistle and the rondo session commenced. As soon as it commenced, Will saw something that startled him just a day before. It was the overlay that guided him as he played. It was just a rondo, so he really didn't need it, but it was nice to have it there. Even though he thought he knew where to pass, the system would give him the best decision to make, so he didn't mind it. As the rondo started, Will's circle managed to keep the ball for a total of 10 minutes before one of the players inside the circle managed to intercept the pass, and then someone else went inside the circle. It kept going around until finally Will ended up inside the circle even with the system's help. His pass wasn't fast enough and ended up being intercepted, so he was forced inside the circle. He didn't really give it his all when he was chasing after the ball. They were less than a minute away from the end of the session, so Will didn't think he needed to do much. He just kept chasing after the ball until he decided to do a half-hearted lunge. He stretched out his leg and shifted his body weight towards the ball, and he almost managed to nick it off the legs of the person who was with the ball, but the person reacted faster. He dragged the ball back a bit before passing it through Will's outstretched legs. Will was about to turn around and act like nothing happened when he heard a soft thud. He turned around and saw the person who nutmegged him on the floor. "Fuck me. Ha 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 ha. Oh, fuck, I can't stop laughing, man." Liam, the person who nutmegged Will, said in between gasps. It would have been alright if it was just him, but then he looked around and saw everyone else from his rondo laughing. Even some people from the other rondos had to stop and laugh. "Come on guys, like you've never been nutmegged before," Will sighed. Their response to his statement was to break into an even bigger fit of laughter. Even some of the coaches began to chuckle, causing Will to sigh in frustration. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath as he sat on the grass, waiting for everyone to stop laughing. Chapter 5, Revenge Mission. While Will sat on the grass waiting for the torrent of laughter to pass, he heard a bell chime sound in his mind. Soon, the system interface that had become a regular sight to him in the last few days appeared. Ding! Host has been given a new mission. Mission: you're all teenagers at the height of your emotions playing, so you must have been pissed. To gain your representative back, get revenge on the person that nutmegged you or complete 3 nutmegs during the next training session that you're opportune to do so. Reward: 50 credits. Will had to wipe his eyes when he read the mission along with the stakes involved with it. He had a big smile on his face. They had a potential 11v11 matchup later, so there would be plenty of opportunity for him to get his revenge. David called all the players in a few seconds later. "All right boys, you did well today, so it's only right that you get the promised reward. Actually, you're only getting this because Liam's nutmeg on Will made me laugh, so thank Will for spreading his legs." David's remark earned quite a few chuckles from the boys. "We're going to have an 11v11 training match in a few. We just need the assistants to clear up the field. It's going to be 2 20-minute halves cause we have been training all day and I don't want you to pick up injuries because of this." Nobody seemed to have any complaints about it, and very soon, the 2 teams were decided. Will was playing on the right side of a 4-4-2. And to his dismay, Liam was his teammate, playing in the center, so he really couldn't get revenge on him. The 2 teams were a good mix of the starters and the bench players, so it was a fairly even matchup. Everyone went to their respective halves on the pitch and the coach blew his whistle to signify the beginning of the match. As soon as the match started, Will saw the now familiar overlay from the system. A soft smile spread on his face as he jogged forward as his team started without the ball. A couple of minutes passed before Will got his first touch of the game. It was nothing special. His team had regained possession at the edge of their half and he just passed it to a teammate that was higher up with his first touch. Unfortunately, the potential counter-attack was put to waste by poor decision-making. Will's first standout moment was at the 10th minute of the first half. He got the ball at the edge of the halfway line and instead of passing to recycle possession, he made a run forward, finding himself face to face with an opposition player just 3 steps in. His legs flashed over the ball as he did a couple of stepovers before releasing it to the width where his fullback made an overlapping run. As soon as he released the ball, he continued running forward, and his fullback passed him the ball on the underlap. A brief look-up made him realize that he was only about 10 yards away from the opposition penalty box. With his first touch, he deftly put the ball within the legs of the person that rushed at him, before sending a low pass to the middle of the field to Liam, and then ran inside the box. Ding! 1/3 nutmegs completed. Liam read Will's intention well and sent a chipped pass back into the box for Will to chase down, but it unfortunately had too much power behind it, so it ended up safely in the grasp of the goalkeeper. "Damn it," Will muttered under his breath as he halted his run and turned around to see Liam making an apologetic gesture. Will waved him off and started jogging back. The rest of the first half passed without any real hassle. Neither team could break the deadlock before the break. This was because they had been training all day, and although they were excited to play the match, their bodies were not, so it showed in their actions as they were a little exhausted. The second half started just as the first half ended, on a boring note. It was basically the two teams recycling possession of the ball. That was until the 5th minute of the second half, where there was a moment of magic. Liam received the ball at the edge of his penalty area, and used a body feint to get past his first marker, running into the bit of space left for him in the midfield. He was confronted by another marker and used an elastic to get past him this time. Like that, he kept running with the ball, using misdirection and tricks to maneuver his way with the ball. At the edge of the opposition penalty area, he saw his wingers running on either side of him and made the safer pass, a through ball, to Will, who was running on the right flank. Will and the opposition fullback ran towards the ball. A race that Will won. He did a Ronaldo-style chop as soon as he got the ball, then passed it back to his fullback, who read his intention and passed the ball back to him. While Will was running, he had his head down and was unable to see anything, so when he got the ball back from his fullback, he thought he had time to pass, only to see a red dot appearing behind him from the system overlay. He immediately stopped and dragged the ball back, causing it to go between the legs of the overeager marker, and then laid it off to the penalty area, which was a little free. Ding! 2/3 nutmegs completed. Liam made a box-crashing run and hit the ball first time, sending it to the top corner of the far post. Will had a huge grin on his face as soon as the ball entered the net. Anyone watching would think that he was happy because his team scored, but the reality was that he was happy because the nutmeg he just completed took him one step closer to completing the system mission and getting his sweet 50 credits. The rest of the match passed by without anything major happening. Will had thankfully been able to complete a third nutmeg and the system mission by extension, putting him in a happy mood as training finished. After the match was over, David addressed the players before sending them home. Will went to the locker room, changed back to his regular outfit before heading home. His house was surprisingly empty when he came in. He just went up to his room, showered and lay on his bed thinking about the meeting with David. It could either turn out very good or very bad. He wasn't naive to think that one above average showing in training was enough to change the coach's mind about releasing him, but a man could hope. He really didn't want to be released, but even if he was, he wouldn't have been as hopeless as before. At least not while he had the system with him. Will smiled when he thought about the system. He had been at rock bottom and the system came and filled him with so much hope and anticipation for the future. He was really grateful to it. System, I want to see my stats, Will said. Chapter 6, The Talk 1. System, I want to see my stats. Ding. Downloading host stats. Ding. Stats downloading. Age, 17. Club, affiliation, Middlesbrough FC Academy, U18. Position, attacking midfielder, second striker, central midfielder, right midfielder. Status, Academy Scholar. Current rating, 54. Potential cap, 72. Credits, 90. Core stats. Pace, 58. Shooting, 51. Passing, 55. Dribbling, 53. Defending, 47. Physicality, 48. Endurance, 60. Mental, 61. Set pieces, 44. Leadership, 39. Will smiled in satisfaction when he saw his stats. He hadn't made any improvements, at least not according to the system anyway, since he got the system, but he was generally playing better thanks to the system overlay, and there was real hope for him developing thanks to the cap expansion system. The next morning, he was supposed to have a meeting with David. He had no idea what was going to be said in the meeting, and even though he was trying his best to be hopeful, he couldn't help but feel nervous. Even though being released from Middlesbrough wasn't as scary a prospect to him as it was 3 days ago, he still did not want to be released. They were his local club and he had been supporting them all his life. It would be a dream come true for him to rise through their ranks and make his debut for the first team. Will took a deep breath to calm himself and then tried to focus his thoughts on other topics. After quite a few minutes, he finally tired out and fell asleep. The next morning, Will woke up early as usual. He felt unusually tired, but he pulled through and forced himself to go to Rockcliffe Park. He went inside and set up a few training cones in close proximity to each other, leading up to a small-sized goalpost he had brought outside with the training cones. After he was done setting things up, he took his football to the starting point of the cones and dribbled through the cones without slowing down, and when he was done with the path, he fired into the small net. About 10 minutes later, he shot the ball into the back of the net for the last time and smiled in satisfaction when he heard a signature bell chime sound in the back of his mind. Ding! Daily mission completed. Mission: complete 101v0 dribble and shoot drills. Reward: 20 credits. Will sighed when he saw the message. He collapsed to the ground and lay there for a few minutes before he packed the training equipment from the field and carried it back to where he picked it from. After he finished with that, he went back to the locker room and waited for everyone to arrive with the rest of the boys for training. "All right, boys, today we're going to go a little harder than we've been going this week," David said as everyone gathered at the center of the pitch. "Our first friendly of the preseason is against a trial team like I said yesterday, and even though we should absolutely blitz them, I still don't want to take any chances, so we'll be preparing in kind. We're going to do a lot of technical and physical drills, and everything will be capped off by finishing drills for the forwards, passing drills for the midfielders, defensive positioning and defending drills for the defenders, and the goalkeepers will do whatever it is they do with the goalkeeping coach." Will groaned internally when he heard the training programs. He was already slightly jaded from the system-force training that he did earlier, and now he had to train with even more intensity when his place at the academy was most likely riding on his performance. "Alex is going to be glad he missed this, that is for sure," Will thought to himself before he groaned and started stretching with the rest of the boys on the field. Will managed to get through the rest of the training session without dropping his intensity. He was battered by the end, but hey, at least he survived. It seemed like everything was difficult to do, especially the passing drills. His slightly overhit pass didn't seem like much when the conditions were optimal. Instead, he looked like a bum who couldn't complete a long pass for the life of him. "Thank God that's over now," Will thought to himself as he sat on the bench inside the locker room and changed into his regular outfit from his training wear. "Smithson, my office." David stepped inside the locker room briefly and then stepped outside. As soon as David finished speaking, Will rushed to change out of his training wear, messily stuffed all his things into his bag and then ran out of the locker room and into David's office. David was already in his chair when Will came in. His jacket was off, draped over the back of the seat, and he had his hands folded on the desk. He watched Will come in and didn't say anything until Will had shut the door. "Sit down." Will nodded and dropped onto one of the two seats that were arranged in front of David's chair. His heart pounded wildly as he settled his gaze to focus on David's eyes. He was about to have the conversation that could change the trajectory of his career. Things could either go very well from here on out or they could go south. And it all depended on what David had to say to him. "All right, Will, I know you know why I called you in today," David spoke after a few seconds of awkward gazing. Will nodded slightly. "Yeah, all right then, I won't waste too much of your time," David said. Chapter 7, The Talk 2. "All right then, I won't waste too much of your time," David said. "You came in on Tuesday," he said. Will smiled awkwardly as soon as he heard the statement. It was only at that moment that it dawned on him that he was explicitly told not to report to training, and he disobeyed the orders for 3 days in a row. "I did," Will nodded, while releasing a breath. "I told you not to come in on Tuesday," David spoke again. He wasn't even asking questions, It was like he was just stating things that had already happened. You did? Will nodded again. This time, he had a nervous smile on his face. David nodded slowly, then sized the player in front of him for a few seconds before he started talking again. This time, he spoke just a single word. Why? Will opened his mouth to talk almost immediately. But halfway through the process of producing speech, he realized that he didn't have anything to say, at least not right away, so he closed it and thought for a few seconds before he gave a reply. I really didn't see the point of staying away, Will shrugged. I mean, if there's a review happening, I'd rather give you something to review and think about than sit at home and mope about. He winced internally as he spoke, because that was precisely what he was going to do. If not for his mom who talked some sense into him, he probably would have been part of the trialists playing friendlies against some other club's under-18 squad. David didn't respond immediately. He paused for a few seconds as if he was weighing what Will said before he spoke again. Now about the squad review, David started talking. I was supposed to release 6 players to free up slots for the next batch of scholars. So I had to release 6 players among 10 underperformers, so you being told to wait at home didn't mean that you were guaranteed to be released. Although you would have if you did stay at home, so I guess that's good for you then, David said, causing Will to exhale almost immediately. Jacobson, Orton, the 2 Patricks, Damelaire, and Farrell. David read 6 names from a paper on his desk. Those are the players that are going to be released. Will didn't say anything, but he went through the names of each of the players mentioned. He knew all of them, but was only friends with about 2 of them, and even though he was relieved to be in the clear, it was still sad for him to hear that his friends were released. So congratulations Smithson, we're keeping you on, David said, and Will released a breath he didn't know he was holding out of relief for himself. But remember that you've got 1 more year on your contract and you will actually be released if you don't perform to standard within that year. Right, Will said. You don't even seem remotely surprised by this, David chuckled. But on Tuesday you had a good training session, and then the gatekeeper told me that you'd always come earlier than everyone else to train in the morning, David said. And between you and me, it was a bit of a mini-manimo between you and Farrell, and I decided to keep you because you've shown that you have the determination and grit to make it as a pro. The only thing that can let you down at this junction is your ability. But that's nothing a little bit of grit and fight can't fix, and I've noticed that you have a lot of those. So never stop fighting, Smithson. I won't, Will nodded with a small smile on his face. He felt pissed as hell when he heard that he was almost released on the whims of the coach, but he ended up staying, so it was water under the bridge. It wasn't like he could keep a grudge. Of course you will, David said. Your passing has gotten a lot better. Well, not your passing itself, but your ability to spot those open teammates far away. I've been working on my vision a bit, Will said. Welp, it's working, David said. All right, that's all for now. Nice talk. I look forward to seeing you in training and seeing how you fight for your spot in this team. I'm actually rooting for you, so don't disappoint me, Will. I won't, Will said lightly before stepping out of the office. You're going to start on Saturday. In the friendly. It's a friendly against trialists, so of course the reserves are starting, but I'm telling you ahead of time because it's an audition for you. Will you remain a reserve or will you push into the first team? That's a question only you can answer. Will nodded slightly, reflecting on David's words as he exited the office. 1 year. That was how much time he had to break into the first team, or at least show he was good enough to earn a new contract and play with the B team. It wasn't a reprieve exactly. It was just a window of opportunity that Will intended to make the most out of. David was right about him. He was a fighter. The only thing was that for the past year or so, he had been fighting a losing battle. Now with the system, things were a lot different. He was willing to put in the work, and now he had a cheat code that made things easier for him. He wasn't going to go down without a fight. And he was going to fight to the very best of his ability. Ding! Host has unlocked super mission. Mission: David, your head coach, likes you but is not convinced about your ability. Remove all his doubt and drop masterclass performances in the preseason to book your spot as a starter in the coming under-18 season. Target: have an average match rating of 8.0 in the preseason. Reward: 200 credits. Good luck. Will smiled when he saw the system interface light up in front of him, and he smiled even more when he read the content of the notification. 1 year, that's more than enough, Will thought to himself as he arrived home. Chapter 8, The Smithsons. How was training today? As soon as Will entered his house, he was greeted by a masculine voice. As soon as he heard the voice, he looked up sharply and saw a man who could only be described as an older version of him sitting on the couch. "Dad," Will exclaimed as he rushed over to the couch and gave his dad a passionate handshake and a hug. "You weren't supposed to be back till next week. I decided to cut my trip short. Your mum told me what happened, so I decided to come back so I could help if you got released." Will smiled when he heard his dad's response. His dad had supported him every step of the way in his football journey. From when he was just a child and was accepted into Middlesbrough's academy, till now. He had always been there. "Thank you," Will said sincerely. "But it wasn't necessary." "No, it was," Gary said. "We have to plan our next steps from here. I'll talk to some of my friends and have them ask around if we can get you in a trial. It's a little late for that, but even if it is a League One club, then we'll have to take it." Will smiled at his dad's concern. "No, I meant you really didn't have to, because I just had a talk with the head coach, and I'll be staying for the next year, which is when my contract ends." "That's great," Gary smiled almost immediately. Then he frowned again. "But that's just a year. We have to make plans for if they release you again. No offense, but you aren't exactly the hottest cake around if they were willing to release you. We don't need to worry about that. I have a year, 1 year to show them that I'm not the type of player to be released." "I'll show them," Will said. Gary stared at him for a few moments before nodding slightly. "All right, I believe you." "Ugh," a feminine voice sounded from further inside the house. "You guys make me want to gag. If you're done with your mushy father-son moment, get your asses over here so we can eat. I'm starving." Will turned his head in the direction the voice came from and saw that the dining table was completely set up with 4 plates in front of 4 chairs, and the meal in the middle of the table. Will's mum sat in one of the chairs on the right side of the table, right next to the head of the table, while there was a girl that looked about 15 years of age sitting opposite her. She had blonde hair, like Will, but that was as far as their resemblance went. While Will was a carbon copy of his father, she was like a younger version of his mother. "Janet, always a pleasure to hear your voice," Will said with a stiff smile. The tone of his voice told everyone that he did not at all mean what he said. "Nice to see you too, brother," Janet returned the stiff smile. "Now get your bottom here so we can start eating. We've been waiting forever for you to arrive." "You guys waited for me?" Will raised an eyebrow. Usually, if he took too long to arrive, they'd just leave his meal in the fridge or something. No, we didn't wait for you. We just like our food getting cold. "'Cause we like eating cold food," Janet said with a deadpan expression, causing Sandra to chuckle a bit. "I always forget how much I really like you," Will muttered under his breath as he walked over to his seat and sat down. Will and Gary took their seats, the soft scrapes of their chairs against the ground reverberating inside of the otherwise silent room. Sandra opened one of the pots and the rich aroma spread around the room, causing Will's stomach to rumble softly, making him realize how hungry he actually was. A few moments passed in silence. Nobody spoke. Everyone got served, and the sound of cutlery clinking created an oddly calming rhythm inside the room. Will quite liked the silence. It was good and it allowed him to think properly, even while eating. Unfortunately, all good things, as they say, come to an end. Janet broke the silence. "So," she stabbed her fork into a piece of chicken and brought it to her lips. "Future superstar, how does it feel to almost get dropped?" "Okay," We're going straight into that, Will answered without looking up from his plate. I'm serious. I need to hear about it, Janet said. Everyone's been acting mysterious lately. Mum wouldn't even tell me what happened properly. Because it wasn't your business to spread around school, Sandra replied while shooting Janet a look. I wouldn't spread it, Janet said. Then paused because of the 3 knowing gazes directed at her. Okay, maybe a little, but only to the people I like, which, as you all know, are not much at all. Doesn't matter how many people you spread it to, you're still spreading it, Will muttered. Gary cleared his throat loudly and turned to face Janet from the head of the table. That's enough for now. We'll talk about this when everyone's finished eating. Will sighed and finally dug into his food. He really didn't waste any time with it and ate with the ferocity of a man who was hungry from an intense training session. The manner with which he ate drew a few weird glances from his family, but Will didn't care. In his mind, it was only him and his food and him. And he wasn't going to let a few weird glances get in the way of him and his food. Unfortunately for Will, his euphoria and fantasy world was destroyed by the soft voice of his mother who asked him a question. So, what did the coach actually say today? Sandra asked softly. He said that I was a fighter. Apparently, that's why he didn't release me, Will said. He was going to continue talking, but then he was interrupted by Janet. You must not be a very good fighter then, if you almost got released from the team, Janet said while cocking her head to the side. Will gave her a bombastic side eye. Do you mind? What? Janet said. I'm giving you good feedback. One might even say that I'm helping with your character development. Anyways, Will ignored her and turned his attention back to Sandra. He said he was going to give me a chance to fight. This weekend, we have a friendly against trialists, so he's going to start me and then we'll see what happens from there. That's great, Sandra exclaimed with a smile. Not really, Will shook his head. It's just a friendly and then it's against trialists. He probably won't take it seriously. He just said it to get me motivated or something. But it is a starting point, so I have to give my all. You'll drop a masterclass and show him how good you are, Gary said. I believe in you. Thanks, Dad, Will said with a smile. Yuck, Janet stuck out her tongue. You're going to make me vomit everything I just ate. Oh, shut up. That was the last of the conversation about Will and his current situation in the football team. As dinner passed, the family talked about the things happening in their respective lives before parting. As soon as they separated, Will went to his room, changed into his nightwear and collapsed on his bed. He was already feeling tired before the intense training session, and he had no time to rest after it. He went to meet with David almost immediately after the session, and when he came home he was ambushed for dinner, so now that he could sleep, he didn't waste any time. He hadn't even laid on the bed for more than 10 minutes when he fell asleep. Chapter 9, Nothing to Lose. When Will woke up the next morning, like he usually did, he went to the training facilities and started with the system's daily quest. Today, it didn't ask him to do anything strenuous, he just worked on his finishing. He was asked to take shots from various distances in and around the penalty box, and he got a reward of 20 credits. This damn system. I thought it said the reward for the daily quests varied. How come I've only gotten 20 credits every day so far? Will thought to himself as he walked off the pitch and went inside of the locker room. Minutes later, the players started arriving and training started. The match was the next day, so training wasn't as physically tasking as it was mentally. The team just did some light exercises, and after which they had a short gym session and they did a comprehensive tactical breakdown. When they were finally done, David addressed everyone inside the locker room before releasing them. Will went back home and realized no one was around. He was released quite a bit early today, so it made sense. After he went to his room, he changed into more comfortable clothes and walked to the backyard of the house, to his makeshift practice pitch. The grass there already looked worn out and was in need of maintaining. There were dry patches and mudstains where he had stepped on from past training sessions. A not at all ideal pitch, but it meant more to him than playing in the biggest stadiums in the world. That was where everything started. He remembered when he decided he wanted to play football. It was the Champions League final between Barcelona and Manchester United. He and his dad were Manchester United fans and they were rooting for their team to win only to be dazzled by a 5 feet 7 inches man from Rosario, Argentina. From that day, Will decided he wanted to be like Messi. A player so good that he didn't feel any hate for him in his heart after he watched him tear his favorite team, only worship and adoration. Will continued sitting there and thinking. From the Champions League final, he started thinking about the match that he was going to play the next day. He felt pretty confident because he had the system with him, but he would be lying to himself if he said that he didn't feel nervous at all. The system helped him and guided him on the pitch, but it was still up to him to make the actions required himself. He was still the one that would make the pass or make the run or take the shot. Being more intelligent wouldn't make him significantly better if he didn't have the required ability. "What are you doing moping out here?" A female voice sounded from behind Will. Will didn't need to look behind to realize who spoke. He spent the majority of his life annoyed at that voice. "I'm thinking," Will said. Janet walked over to where Will was and sat down beside him. "You're nervous?" Janet asked. "Yeah," Will nodded. "I would have been released if I didn't come into training, and even though I have another chance, what if I'm still not good enough?" The pair sat in silence for a few seconds after Will spoke, before Janet broke the silence. "If that's what you're worried about, then you really are a bum," Janet said. "Don't you understand what's happened? They released you. They don't need you. You might as well be released, and the only reason you aren't is because the coach likes you. You're at rock bottom trying to climb a mountain, so you have nothing to lose. You can't be worried about not being good enough because they have already told you that you aren't good enough. Now you have to work hard and train and make yourself better so that in a year they'll tell you something different." Will looked at his sister with a surprise in his eyes as she was talking. As she spoke, he realized that she was right. He was at rock bottom trying to climb his way up. He had everything to gain and nothing to lose, so why was he afraid of losing? "Damn, when did you get so smart?" Will said as he patted Janet's forehead. Janet forcefully pushed his arm back. "I've always been so smart. You've just been too dumb to see it." Will chuckled. "Fair enough, I should have seen that coming." Will looked out at the pitch again, tracing the worn patches of grass with his eyes. The dry spots told a story, each one a memory of early mornings and late evenings, of shots taken and missed, of drills repeated until his legs gave out beneath him. He had spent so much time out here chasing something he wasn't even sure he could reach, and now that he was closer to it than he had ever been, he was sitting here letting fear eat at him. That wasn't who he was. "You hungry?" Janet asked, already standing up and brushing the back of her shorts. "Yeah, what's there to eat? Mum left some rice before she went out. I can warm it up." "That works," Will said, standing up beside her. They walked back inside together and Janet disappeared into the kitchen while Will dropped onto the couch in the living room. He picked up the remote and turned on the television but didn't really pay attention to what was on. His mind was still outside on that pitch, still turning over what his sister had said. She was right. There was a freedom in having nothing to lose that he hadn't allowed himself to feel until now. Every player at the top of the game was playing with the pressure of maintaining something. They had contracts worth millions, reputations built over years, expectations from fans and coaches and entire nations. Will had none of that. He was a player on borrowed time, given one more chance by a coach who believed in him more than he currently believed in himself. That wasn't a burden. That was an opportunity. He thought about the players he had grown up watching. Not just Messi, but all of them. The ones who came from nothing and built themselves into something. None of them had arrived at the top already complete. They were all works in progress at some point, rough edges and raw talent, being shaped by every game and every setback into the players they would eventually become. He wanted to be one of those players. Chapter 10, What It Means. As Will sat in the living room, waiting for his sister to finish with warming the food, his phone buzzed on the cushion beside him and he picked it up. It was a message from Will. Alex, you good for tomorrow? Will, yeah, you. Alex, always. Get some rest tonight, man, don't be overthinking. Will smiled and put the phone back down. Alex had a way of saying the right thing in the fewest possible words. He had been one of the first people at the club to actually talk to Will like a person rather than someone who was just taking up space in training. Will appreciated that more than he ever said out loud. Janet came back into the living room carrying 2 plates and handed one to Will before dropping down on the other end of the couch and tucking her legs underneath her. "You're watching this?" she asked, looking at the television with a frown. "I wasn't really watching anything." She took the remote and changed the channel to something she preferred, some drama series she had probably already seen twice. Will didn't mind. He ate quietly and let the noise of the television fill the room. "Are you starting tomorrow?" Janet asked without looking away from the screen. Will turned to look at her, while blinking rapidly. "Are you serious? I just told you this." "Yes," Will stopped himself. Yes, I'm starting." "That's good, you need to make an impression so you need all the game time you can get." "I know, like actually make an impression. Not just run around like a cardio merchant or something. Do something that people remember." Will glanced over at her. "You're really into this tonight." "I'm into it every day," she said, still not looking at him. "I just laugh at you most times, but I decided not to laugh today." "Thanks," Will said. "Don't thank me," Janet said. "I just didn't think it would be fun to kick a dead dog." "Fair enough. I should have seen that coming." Will shrugged. After they finished eating, Janet took the plates back to the kitchen and Will stayed on the couch for a little while longer before deciding to do something productive with the rest of his evening. He went upstairs to his room and opened his laptop. He had been in the habit lately of watching footage of the teams they were going to play against, not in any deeply analytical way, just getting a feel for how they moved and pressed and defended. He pulled up some clips on his laptop, but there wasn't much to work with. It was a friendly, and the other side was made up mostly of trialists, players from different clubs and different backgrounds thrown together with no real coherent identity yet. There was no real tactical shape to study, no patterns built over months of working together, no set pieces drilled into muscle memory. They were essentially strangers to each other, which meant the match tomorrow would be scrappy and disjointed in the way that these kinds of games always were. Will closed the laptop after a few minutes because there was genuinely nothing useful he was going to get from staring at it. You couldn't prepare tactically for a group of individuals who hadn't prepared tactically for themselves. The match would be decided by moments, by individual quality, by who wanted it more when the ball fell in a dangerous area. That was actually something he could work with. The system hadn't offered him any breakdown either. There was nothing for it to analyze. There were no tendencies or preferred tactical or defensive shape as they were a trialist team, so everything that happened tomorrow would be on him. Well, him and the information the system would give him after the match started. Seeing as there was nothing else to do to calm his head, he spent the greater part of the night doom scrolling until he got tired and closed his laptop and stared at the ceiling in deep thought. He thought about his dad. His dad had been the one sitting beside him during the Champions League final, the one who had groaned loudly when Messi scored and then gone quiet for a long moment before shaking his head slowly and saying, "You know what, you can't even be angry at that. That man is different." Will had been 4 years old and he had understood exactly what his dad meant. There was a level of quality that existed beyond rivalry and beyond allegiance. A level that simply demanded respect. His dad had driven him to training every Saturday morning for 3 years without ever complaining about it once. He had stood on the sideline in the cold watching Will play for his youth team, always the first to clap and the last to leave. He never pushed too hard or said too much. He just showed up, every time, and let Will know through his presence that whatever Will was building mattered. He wasn't around to see tomorrow's match. Will thought about that for a moment and let it sit with him the way he usually did when it came up. Not with grief anymore, not really, but with a quiet kind of weight that never fully left. He wanted to play well tomorrow for a lot of reasons, and that was one of them. For his dad. He wanted him to come home and be greeted with the news of how well he played and how he's made sure that the David had to start considering him for the team. He reached over and turned off the bedside lamp and lay in the dark listening to the sounds of the house settling around him. Downstairs he could faintly hear the television still playing and Janet moving around in the kitchen. He thought about the pitch outside, the worn grass and the mud stains and the blood and sweat he left on the pitch, how much he practiced until he could no longer feel his legs, all the goals he scored in front of nobody. He thought about tomorrow. He wasn't afraid anymore. What his sister had said had stripped something loose in him, and now there was just a steadiness sitting where the nerves had been. A readiness. He had worked for this, trained for this, given up things for this. Whatever happened tomorrow was not going to define him permanently, but it was going to tell him something about who he was when it mattered. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow he would find out. Chapter 11, The Journalist. The next morning, Will arrived at Rockcliffe Park roughly 30 minutes past 5. He had slept poorly the night before. Not because he was anxious, even though he was, but because his mind couldn't just let him rest. As much as he was anxious and nervous about the match, he was also excited. It was like his mind kept going in this rollercoaster ride of emotion, uncaring about the consequences on his physical and mental well-being. Will released a sigh as he stared blankly in front of him. He thought that match day was going to be free of a daily quest, but he was wrong. Glowing softly in the dark, he saw the system's notification panel with a message. Daily quest. Complete 150 first touch reps with the rebounder wall. Target. Each touch must set up a clean second touch within 1.5 seconds. Time limit, 30 minutes. Will groaned internally when he read the mission. It wasn't like it was difficult to do exactly. He just really wanted to sleep and didn't feel like overexerting his body, and using whatever little energy he had left was the wise thing to do. Still, he brought out the football and dragged himself to the rebounder wall so that he could start with the quest. Will just finished with the system's daily quest and was smiling at the successful notification message in front of him when he heard footsteps on the gravel path that connected the main pitch to the car park. He didn't think much of it at first. He had been coming early for the past week, and he'd see the groundskeeper or some other maintenance staff come in to take care of things while he was training. But then he heard a voice that definitely did not belong to a groundskeeper. "Sorry, hi. Are you one of the players?" A feminine voice sounded. Will looked up. There was a girl standing at the edge of the pitch. She was roughly his age, or at most a year older if she were to be older. She had dark-colored hair pulled back into a loose ponytail that was already unraveling due to the cold morning wind. In one hand she was holding a recorder and had a notebook in the other hand, and she was wearing a puffer jacket that was a little too big for her, which successfully covered the rest of her attire. She was looking at Will with a little bit of fascination as she had watched him train for a couple of minutes before interrupting him. "Yeah," Will said, collapsing on the ground and breathing evenly. "Can I help you? I'm from Teesside University," the girl said, while walking closer to Will. "I'm doing a journalism assignment on youth footballers. I got permission from the club administration to come to the ground today for the friendly and talk to a few players beforehand. I've got clearance and everything, even a letter," she said while fishing her jacket, presumably looking for the letter. Will blinked a few times watching the girl search for the letter or pass. He wasn't exactly paying attention to what she was saying, before stretching her hands out. "You don't need to show me a letter, I'm not a staff," Will said. "Right, yes, of course." She stopped searching. I wasn't sure if anyone was going to be here this early. I came early because I thought the players might be more relaxed before a match than after." "Is that naive?" "A bit," Will said. Most of the boys won't be here for another hour and a half. Oh, she said, then scribbled something in her notebook. But you're here. I'm always here early. Can I ask why? Will stared at her for a couple of seconds, before letting out a light chuckle. Are you interviewing me right now? She gave him a sheepish smile. A little bit. Is that okay? I can go and wait by the main building if you'd rather. Will regarded her for a moment. He considered telling her to do just that, but then if she left, he would be left by himself for an hour having nothing but the darkness and cold of the morning to keep him company, which paled a lot in comparison to having a chat with a pretty university student. Stay if you want, Will said, and played around with the ball. Just don't get in the way of the ball. She moved to the side and sat on an advertising hoarding that ran all the way along the edge of the pitch, then she opened her notebook and spread it on her knee. Shortly after, Will heard a soft clicking sound which told him that she had started recoding. So why are you always here early? She asked again. Because I'm not good enough yet, Will replied after a moment of thought. He struck the ball on the rebounder wall, before trapping it cleanly and collapsing on the floor. If I only train when everyone else trains, I'll only be as good as everyone else. I don't want to be as good as everyone else. There was a silent pause, which made the sound of her scribbling in her notebook more pronounced. Is it working? Will let out a small smile. Ask me in a year. She laughed. It was a short laugh, causing Will to raise an eyebrow. He didn't think he was being funny. I'm Chloe, by the way, she said after her short burst of laughter. Chloe Marsh. Will Smithson. Nice to meet you, Will Smithson. Chloe said. Are you a starter today? Yeah. Does that make you nervous? Why would I be nervous? Will scoffed lightly. It's just a friendly against trialists. You say it like it's not scary at all. Chloe said. But you're here for what? An hour already? Before anyone else? In the cold. Alright, I'm nervous. Will smiled. I was almost released this week. The coach was going to cut me from the squad but I managed to change his mind. But I still have to prove myself, so today matters a lot more than it should for a friendly against trialists. Will wasn't even sure why he said the second part of his statement, he just said it. It wasn't like it was a deeply personal secret or something. He was just stating facts. When he finished talking, Chloe stared at him intensely. That's a good story, she said finally. It's not a story, it's my life. Will said. Same diff. Chloe shrugged. Our lives are all just stories unraveling if you deep it. Can quote you on the almost being released thing, or is that off the record? You can quote me, Will said. If it makes anyone reading it think twice before giving up, that's not a bad thing. Chloe smiled. It was a proper one, wide enough that it reached her eyes. You're much more interesting than I expected a 17-year-old footballer to be. How interesting were you expecting? My previous interview was with a winger who told me his greatest inspiration was his FIFA Ultimate Team lineup. Will laughed. It came out louder than he intended, and the sound of it bounced around the empty ground in the cold morning air. It felt strange coming out of him. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed properly, not the hoarse, slightly hysterical one he'd given to the sky 2 nights ago, but a real one. That's genuinely terrible, he said. I know, I have to write 800 words about it, she said, and she was smiling too, and for a moment the two of them were just standing and sitting in the cold at 5:30 in the morning on a Friday in February, laughing about a winger's FIFA team, and it was fine. It was more than fine, actually. The session started at 7:30. Will jogged back to get changed. At the entrance to the changing room block, he turned around and Chloe was still sitting on the hoarding writing in her notebook, the recorder still going. Will you be watching the match? He called over. She looked up. That's why I'm here. Then watch the second half, he said. That's when I'm usually better. She raised an eyebrow. Confident. Prepared, he corrected, and went inside. Chapter 12. First friendly. The trialists were what one could call a mixed bag. There were a few boys among them who had genuine quality. It was apparent when they warmed up. You could size someone up in the way they received a pass or in the way they made a pass, how they moved when performing certain actions. The outstanding players were probably the ones already on the radar of some clubs. They were probably just considering their options by showing up to this game. The rest were fillers. It wasn't that they weren't good or anything, they just weren't good enough. They weren't anything special. They weren't bad, but it was apparent to anyone watching them that they just weren't going to make it. It's not too late for type of players. Most of them already knew that they weren't going to make it professionally, but they probably just wanted to give it the best. Will respected their struggle. In fact, he probably would have been one of them, just playing in another club just a week ago. Like David promised him, he was in the starting 11. He was playing as a right midfielder in a 4-4-2 formation. When he saw the team sheet, he felt a wave of anxiety wash over him which later calmed. If the match was against the trialists that he saw training earlier, then he didn't have a reason to be scared. If anything, they should be the ones scared of him. He changed into his jersey and after he wore his soccer boots, he saw a notification pop up in front of him. Match day mission. Friendly, Middlesbrough U18 vs Trial 11. Objectives. Primary, achieve match rating of 8.0 and above. Secondary, complete at least 2 key passes. Secondary, score or assist. He smiled when he saw the objectives. The system told him to get an average of 8.0 ratings in the preseason, so that made much sense as the primary objective. It was the secondary ones that made him smile. Not because he thought that they would be easy, but because he was hopeful about the amount of credits he would get from accomplishing the missions. David walked in and gave the team a pep talk, after which the captain of the under-18s, a central midfielder called John, added his own bit and then the two teams went out for the match. The first 20 minutes of the match were quite ugly for Will. Will's first 2 touches of the ball were a simple control and pass, while his third was a rushed clearance while the defense was under pressure. After that, things started to get better. The overlay helped a lot. He had gotten comfortable with it over the past week. Of course, he wasn't relying on it completely, just using it for instructions. In the 23rd minute, the ball came to him on the right flank from a throw-in. His marker was very close to him, so he couldn't turn. He wouldn't have known this if he didn't see a shadow through the system overlay. The overlay also showed a shadow moving in from his side, causing a bit of space to open centrally, where Marcus, a central midfielder, was making a diagonal run. Will faked cutting inside, dropped his shoulder and then dribbled towards the flanks instead, dragging his marker a step wide. That one step was enough. He fed the ball centrally to Marcus before he was completely closed in by the reinforcements that were arriving, and then continued his run on the flank. Marcus played the ball back to Will in a through pass with his first touch, completing a 1-2. Will caught the ball at the edge of the box. He took a touch to steady himself before cutting in and drilling a low shot to the near post. Unfortunately for him, the trialist goalkeeper got a hand to it and pushed it outside for a corner. It wasn't a goal, but it was one of the closest attempts so far. He glanced up and found Chloe in the small cluster of observers permitted on the far touchline. She wasn't exactly looking at him, rather she was scribbling something on her notepad. The first goal of the match came in the 38th minute. Hayden, the Middlesbrough U18 left back, won possession in his half of the pitch and immediately sent a through pass to Liam, who was playing the match as the left winger. Liam skillfully carried the ball to the attacking third, before slipping a low cross into the box. Marcus made a box-crashing run from the midfield and managed to get on the end of the cross, smashing the ball into the top corner of the goalpost. Goal! Marcus screamed as the ball went into the back of the net. He ran over to Liam and gave him a high five. He didn't celebrate again after that. It was just a friendly against trialists. A friendly that they were expected to win. For the rest of the first half, Will didn't do anything special. He received the ball a couple of times, but he made simple back passes to his fullback. The referee blew his whistle to signify the end of the first half. The two sets of teams immediately stopped play on the pitch and retreated to their respective locker rooms. "All right, boys, that was a shit first half we played out there," David said after everyone walked inside the locker room. "I even threw in some starters in the lineup to put this match beyond doubt, and you're giving me just a goal before half-time. You bums need to fix up and quick. Liam, you are not fucking Neymar. I promise you, you will not die if you pass the ball a little now and then. Because you're playing against trialists does not mean you have to try to show off every single time. And Adam, I didn't play you as a defensive midfielder because I wanted you to escort their players to the goal. Be more aggressive. Push, tackle, get dirty, get a fucking card for all I care, but do something. Will, you're too fucking passive. You're playing it too safe. Control and pass, is that the only thing you know how to do? Take on your man, excite me. You had it right with your only attempt, more of that please." David continued ripping into the players, telling them the flaws in the game and how to improve. After he was done, he left the locker room, and the captain gave them another pep talk and sent them out for the second half. Chapter 13, Much better. The second half was better, both for Will and the rest of the team. David drilling into them and giving them a wake-up call turned out to be exactly what they needed to get into the groove. Will received his first touch of the half in the 49th minute. He got the ball from his right back and sent a first-time pass over the top for one of his team's striker. The striker managed to get the ball under control with his first touch and sent a low drilled shot towards the goal. Unfortunately for him, it bounced off the frame of the far post and went out of bounds for a goal kick. "Nice pass, Will," the striker shouted towards Will, while raising his thumb. Will merely smiled in response and assumed a good position. In the 58th minute, he had another moment of magic. Liam got the ball from his full back on his left flank and played a pass to Marcus in the midfield. Marcus received the ball with his back to goal, shifting his body so that it looked like he was going to turn to his right before sharply turning to his left, wrong-footing the two players coming to mark him. As soon as he turned, he saw Will making a run on the right, and without thinking, he hit the ball and sent a through pass to him, threading the ball between the trialists' last line of defense. Will took the ball in his stride and found himself one-on-one with one of the trialists' centre-back. He did a few body feints before using his right leg to push the ball wide and chasing it. When he got to the ball, he faked a cross, sending the centre-back who jumped into a slide tackle in an attempt to block the cross. Using the bit of time he had bought, Will looked up and picked out an easy pass to the deeper lying striker in the 4-4-2. The striker stopped the ball with his first touch and shot a low drilled shot towards the bottom left corner. It wasn't to be for him though. The goalkeeper of the trialists managed to get a hand to it and push it away for a corner. "Damn it," Will muttered under his breath when he saw the ball go out of bounds. In the 64th minute, he was involved in yet another key play. This time, he won the ball back in the opposition half. His first touch was a tap back to his right back before he started making a run down the right flank. His right back read his intentions well and sent a long pass over the top to him. Will got the ball under control with his first touch and then started cutting towards the penalty box. He found himself one-on-one with a backpedaling trialist centre-back and used a la croqueta to get past the outstretched leg of the defender and played a pass to his team's striker who was inside the box. As soon as the ball got to the striker, he was swamped and didn't have space to get a shot away. Lucky for him, Will didn't stop running, so he managed to pass the ball back to Will with his first touch. Will didn't take a touch to control the ball, he just adjusted his body so that he would be in a comfortable position to shoot and sent his shot flying into the top corner of the far post. The trialist goalkeeper dived at the shot at full stretch, but he just couldn't get a hand to it. He had no choice to watch the ball get into the back of the net. "Goal!" Will shouted and pumped his fists. In the next second he was surrounded by his teammates who kept patting his back and congratulating him before they all walked back to the center circle. As Will was walking back, he saw a familiar holographic display with a new notification that caused a smile to form on his face. Goal scored, +30 credits. Key pass registered, +15 credits. Credit balance, 185. The match ended 3-0. Will was substituted in the 74th minute. He was replaced by one of the new scholars who also needed game time. The friendly was for the fringe players to show what they could do after all. He walked off to the bench to applause from the small group of observers and sat down on the bench. As soon as he sat down, David walked towards him. "Better," David said. "Yeah," Will muttered while nodding slightly. Much better," David said before walking back to the touchline. As soon as the match finished and Will entered the changing room, he saw the system's holographic interface and was greeted by a new notification. Match rating, 7.8. Credits awarded, 50. Credits balance, 215. Will looked at the number on the ratings for a long time. It was 7.8, which meant that he was already behind the required average for him to complete the system's mission. He would need to work harder in the coming days. Outside the changing room, Chloe was waiting. Her notebook was shut and in her hands and the recorder was inside of her pocket. "You scored," she said as soon as Will came outside of the changing room. "I noticed." Will smiled. "You did specifically tell me to watch the second half." "I did," Will said. She looked at him for a moment. "Can I have your number? For the article, I might have follow-up questions." Will looked back at her. She was holding out her phone with a business poker face, but there was this little twinkle in her eyes that suggested otherwise, making a slight smile creep on his face. He took the phone from her hand and typed his number in. "You can call me after 9. Will said. "I'm usually training in the morning. Before sunrise, I know." Chloe said. "I was there." Will handed the phone back to Chloe and she tucked it away and started walking towards the car park. At the edge of the path curving into another direction, she turned around. "I was right, by the way," she said. "You are interesting." Will watched her go, waiting until she was completely gone before breaking into a smile and pumping his fists in the air. "W's in the fucking chat," he shouted to himself before walking back inside. Chapter 14. On Sunday. When Will got back to his house after the match, it was empty, which made sense. It was a Saturday and his dad wasn't around. His mom was probably working and his sister was doing whatever it was that she spent her Saturdays doing. He went up to his room and immediately laid down on his bed. Even though it was just a friendly, he was still too tired from playing and wanted to have a bit of a rest. While he was on his bed, he kept thinking about the match that he played earlier today. He didn't play a terrible game, but he wasn't the best player on the pitch either. Even with the system's overlay guiding him through the match, he was having a stinker until the second half when he picked himself up. That couldn't happen again. He was already behind on the system's average for the preseason mission and he had just one match to set things straight. He had to take his chance no matter what. After spending an unhealthy amount of time replaying the events of the match, Will finally fell asleep. By the time he woke up, it was already past 10 in the evening. He immediately changed into more comfortable clothes and was about to start doom scrolling on his phone when he noticed that he had received a text from an unknown number an hour earlier. Less than unknown number greater than, "Hi, this is Chloe. I have 3 follow-up questions. They're for the article. Are you free to talk?" Will was laying on his bed, doing nothing in particular, so he was absolutely free to talk. But he stared at the message for nearly a minute before he replied. Less than Will greater than, "Yeah, go ahead." Less than Chloe greater than, "Do you have a minute to call?" It's way easier than typing. Will immediately sat up when he read the last statement. He immediately cleaned himself up, even though it was going to be a voice call and not a video call before calling her. She answered on the 3rd ring. Hey, he answered. How's your foot? You were limping a little bit after you got subbed off. Will blinked a couple of times. That's definitely not an interview question. It's my first question. My foot is fine. I caught a boot sometime in the second half. It's nothing. Okay. Will could faintly hear the sound of her scribbling in her notepad in the background. Second question. You said earlier that you train before sunrise because you're not good enough. Is that a modesty thing or is that genuinely how you see yourself? Will blinked a couple of times for the second time in the conversation when he heard the question. It's genuinely how I see myself. I know what I'm good at and I know what I am not good at. And I think that I'm not good at enough things yet, Will said after a few moments of thought. And do you think you will be? Eventually. Yeah, Will replied without any hesitation whatsoever. The system had given him a type of confidence and certainty that he didn't think he was humanly possible. Even if he wasn't confident in his present abilities, he was confident in the caliber of footballer that he could grow into. Third question. Chloe said. She paused for quite a few seconds after beginning her sentence, then she spoke. Do you want to get coffee sometime? This one's not for the article. Will was quiet for a few moments before he found his voice and spoke. I thought you said you had 3 questions for the article, he said. The first 2 were for the article. She said. The third one's mine. Will leaned back into his bed and rubbed his hair. From the hallway, he could hear the sound of Janet's alarms going on. She had a habit of setting alarms for strange times. And it wasn't like she responded to them, she just set them and let them ring. I can do Sunday, Will said. I really don't have training. It's just recovery and then I'm free in the afternoon. Sunday noon, Chloe said. That works. There's a cafe on Linthorpe Road that's decent. Will said. Borough Blend. Do you know the place? I'll find it. After that, there was a few seconds of silence where neither of them spoke a word. It wasn't awkward, but it wasn't comfortable either. Your goal today was good by the way, Chloe said. I mean, I don't know much about football technically, but it looked good. Like you knew exactly what you wanted to do as soon as you got a hold of the ball. Thank you, Will said. That's unusual, isn't it? At this level, it's something I've been working on, he said. You say that about everything. Your passing, your vision, your shooting. What are you not working on? Everything else, Will said, and she laughed again, and it occurred to Will that he was getting quite fond of that laugh already, which was perhaps something he should be keeping track of. I'll see you on Sunday, she said. See you on Sunday, Will said. He put the phone down and lay there looking at the ceiling. He kept thinking about things that had happened today. His match, his date with Chloe. He might not have played as well as he would have wanted to, but it wasn't bad either. While he was sinking deep into his cloud of thoughts, Janet knocked on his door 40 seconds later. Who was that? She said. Nobody. You were smiling through the door. I wasn't. You absolutely were. I could hear it. You can't hear someone smiling. I can, Janet said, with supreme confidence. Was it a girl? Go away, Janet. It was definitely a girl, she said, and he could hear her smiling through the door on her end too, which was significantly more annoying. Her footsteps retreated down the hallway. Will stared at the ceiling a bit longer. He had a second friendly on Wednesday. He needed at least an 8.2 match rating to bring his average up toward the 8.0 target. He should have been thinking about the Wednesday match. He thought about it for approximately 4 minutes before his mind wandered back to the phone call, and then he gave up and went to sleep. Apologies for not updating yesterday, something came up. To compensate, I will be uploading another chapter later today or early tomorrow. I also want to say thank you for the Power Stones, they really meant a lot, every single one. There's going to be a new bonus system for it. 50 Power Stones equals 1 extra chapter. Chapter 15, Coffee at Borough. This chapter is going to be a bit short, it's just a date and I didn't want to drag it out. Borough Blend was a mid-tier coffee shop located at the edge of the street. They had mismatched furniture and the walls had a deep rust color that took a little bit away from its general aesthetic, but then it didn't matter. Their coffee was genuinely very good and that was all their customers seemed to care about. Will had discovered the place 6 months earlier by accident when he made a detour during his morning run, and since then he became a regular. He arrived 7 minutes early at the coffee shop. He had reported to Rockcliffe Park for a short recovery session and the system didn't issue him a daily quest because he just played a match the day before, so he didn't have anything much to do, so he figured it wouldn't hurt to arrive on time. Chloe arrived 3 minutes late, unwinding a scarf from around her neck as she pushed open the door. She was wearing something casual, a jumper and jeans. "Hi," Chloe said as she arrived at the table where Will waited and slid into the chair across from him. "Hi," Will said. "Have you been here for a while?" "I got here early." "You're an early comer, niece," Chloe smiled. "I like being prepared." Chloe looked at him with a faint smile on her face. "That's the second time you've said that to me. It keeps being true." In the next few minutes, they placed their order and made small talk while they waited for their coffee to arrive. Chloe ordered something that Will didn't quite know the name of. It sounded expensive though, so he began mourning for his wallet. "Tell me about Teesside," Will said as they took the first sips of their coffee. "What are you studying?" "Journalism. I'm in my second year," Chloe said, then took another sip of her coffee while tightening her grip on the mug. "I want to do long-form stuff eventually. Profiles, features, not match reports, obviously. Up until yesterday, I didn't even know that there was something called an offside." "Do you want me to explain it?" Will sounded a little enthusiastic. "Absolutely not," Chloe immediately burst his bubble. "Tell me about football without explaining the rules and all that boring stuff and I'm interested. The moment you start talking about offsides and yellow cards, my brain switches off and I start thinking about something else." "What kind of long-form stuff do you want to do?" Will asked. "Stories about people," Chloe said. "That's what I'm interested in. I want to pick their brains and understand how they think and why they respond to certain things. What makes a person do the things they do? What's underneath it?" She stared at him for a couple of seconds before she resumed talking. "Like you, coming in before sunrise because you're not good enough yet. That's a whole story that's waiting to be told in my opinion." "There's really nothing to it," Will said. "There's always a story underneath it." Chloe took a sip of her coffee. "Did you always want to be a footballer?" "Since before I could remember wanting things," Will said. "The defining moment was watching Messi against Manchester United back in 2009. "You support Argentina?" Chloe asked, making Will burst into a fit of laughter. "Argentina is a country. He also plays for a club called Barcelona," Will explained. "But no, I wasn't even supporting the club he played for. He was so good he turned the hater in me into a fan." "Yeah, I figured he has to be pretty good for me to know his name," Chloe said. "And your family, they're in support of your dream?" "Completely," Will said. "My dad made an artificial pitch in the back garden. He works at the steelworks and my mum does 3 jobs. They've never once told me I should do something safer." He paused. "My sister thinks it's hilarious that I almost got released though." Chloe chuckled. "She sounds like a character." "She's a nightmare," Will groaned. "But I'd rather have her than not." Chloe smiled. "I'm an only child. I always wanted a sibling. Now I'm not sure, based on your evidence." Will leaned forward to Chloe. "This discussion is strictly confidential, by the way. You cannot tell her that I said anything positive about her. She'd never let me forget it." Chloe laughed, causing Will to follow suit. "Can I ask you something?" Will said after the laughter died down a bit. "That's usually my line," Chloe replied. "But go on. Why journalism? What made you want to do it?" Chloe considered the question seriously, which Will appreciated. If she answered immediately, it meant that she didn't give much thought to it and just said something for the sake of saying it. "I grew up reading this column," Chloe answered. "It was in a local paper. Just a random bloke who wrote about ordinary people in the area. Not famous people, just ordinary random guys. Things about a woman who ran a food bank, a man who had been working at the same factory for 40 years, a kid who won a regional chess championship. Chloe took the last sip of her coffee. It wasn't just him writing about them, it was the way he wrote about them. Like they mattered completely, like the fact that they existed and were doing this thing that was the most important thing in the world. And I thought, I want to be the person who does that. Who finds people and makes them feel like their story is worth telling. Will was quiet for a moment. That's a good answer, Will said. I know,